company built on motocross grips became the most recognizable eyewear brand in professional sports. Oakley started in a Southern California garage in 1975 with a $300 investment and zero plans to ever make a pair of sunglasses. No investors, no board meetings, just a guy, a radical idea, and a dirt bike track outside his door. Somehow, that small bet turned into a $2.1 billion empire that now sits on the faces of NFL wide receivers, Tour de France champions, and every serious motocross racer worth his gate pick. And it all started with one problem that nobody else could fix. Jim Jannard wasn't a guy who played by the rules. He sold motorcycle parts out of the trunk of his car at Southern California motocross events. He watched riders struggle with grips that went completely useless the moment their palms got sweaty.
You know, we've talked an awful lot about
hard plastics, basic rubber sleeves. Nothing worked under race conditions, and everyone around him just shrugged and moved on. Jannard didn't shrug. In 1975, with $300 and a head full of ideas that nobody asked for, he started a new company. He named it after his English setter, a dog named Oakley, and yes, one of the most recognized brand names in the world was named after a pet. The first problem he set out to solve was simple on paper and brutally difficult in practice. Motocross riders grip a handlebar that vibrates constantly in conditions that are wet, dusty, or physically punishing overall. Add in the forearm fatigue that builds over a 30-minute moto, and a grip that loses traction isn't just an inconvenience. It's a crash waiting to happen. Traditional grips failed because they were smooth under moisture. Your hands sweat. The grip gets slick, you lose the front. That was the reality of motocross handlebar tech in the mid-1970s. So, Jannard developed something he called Unobtanium, a proprietary rubber compound with a characteristic nobody had ever engineered into a grip before. It gets stickier when it gets wet. Not just resistant to moisture, actually improved by it. The more you sweat, the better it held. He paired this material with an ergonomic shape that conformed to the closed human hand. Plus, tread pattern he described as an octopus design with hundreds of tiny suction cup-like structures that locked onto bare hands and gloves alike. The original Oakley grip hit the market in 1975 and instantly went to the top of what any serious rider wanted on their bars. Between 1975 and 1984, Oakley ran through multiple grip iterations, from the original single compound design to the sophisticated two-piece F1 grip system in 1981, which used a softer outer sleeve over a harder inner core to create something that functioned basically like a micro-suspension system, but for your hands. A harder Unobtanium 60 inner structure for stability, a softer Unobtanium 49 outer sleeve for vibration dampening and grip. Each design was a response to real feedback from real riders. And then, just when Oakley had total dominance in the grip category, Jannard walked away from it entirely.
Finally, we came across these O-frame MX goggles, and they've served us really well.
By 1980, Jannard had shifted his focus from the rider's hands to the rider's eyes. And the first attempt was, by almost every technical standard, a disaster. The Oakley O-frame goggle launched in 1980 with one enormous flaw that nobody caught until riders were actually on the track. The lens material was strong, far stronger than anything competitors were using at the time, but the goggle had almost no ventilation. In the heat of a race, the temperature difference between a sweating rider's face and the outside air caused the enclosed lens to fog up almost immediately. Picture this. You're charging into a rhythm section. Your goggles go completely white. You can't see the jump face. That was the real-world experience of the O-frame at launch. And for all intents and purposes, it should have killed the product, but it didn't. Because Jannard pulled off one of the most brilliant unintentional marketing moves in sports history. Before Oakley got involved, goggle straps were either completely blank or had tiny, discrete text on them. Nobody thought about the strap as a surface worth paying attention to. Jannard looked at a motocross helmet and realized the strap was the most visible part of the rider. It wrapped around the most photographed part of the whole package. So he put a massive, bold Oakley logo across the full width of the strap, not a modest logo tucked into the corner. The whole strap. Every photo taken at a motocross event now had Oakley written across the rider's helmet in letters that could be read from the grandstands. Brand recognition exploded. The company fixed the ventilation issues fast, and the revised O-frame became the industry standard. The curved lens it introduced gave riders a wider field of view than the flat, restricted lenses everyone else was making. What started as a technically flawed product became the foundation of a goggle legacy that is still running today.
First and foremost, the first thing we got to talk about.
The real reason Oakley's goggles got so good so quickly was the factory pilot program, and this is where the story gets genuinely interesting. In the early 1980s, Oakley's R&D department was not made up of optical engineers in white coats. It was made up of BMX and motocross riders. The people designing the goggles and putting them together during the week were the same people wearing the prototypes in races on the weekend. That's a closed feedback loop that no corporate lab can replicate. If the goggle foam pinched wrong, the person who felt it on Sunday was the same person who fixed it on Monday. If the lens fogged at a certain temperature, the rider who experienced it was the one adjusting the vent ports. Every design decision came directly from extreme athletic necessity, not from what a committee assumed riders needed. That program also built something harder to measure than product specs, a tight-knit community of people who shared a genuine passion for pushing the limits of what a motorcycle and a human body could do together. And like all communities built around a dangerous sport, it shared in the tragedy of it too. On August 1st, 1982, at the NMA Grand National Motocross Championships in Ponca City, Oklahoma, a car accident involving an Oakley representative claimed the lives of 3 young racers. Teenagers, full of promise. The event shook the entire company. Oakley was not just a brand that sold to motocross riders. It was part of the traveling world of the sport, sharing its campfires and its catastrophes in equal measure. That closeness to the grassroots reality of motocross has never fully left the brand's identity. The technology Oakley built for motocross turned out to work everywhere else too.
I remember from adverts at the time saying that these...
In 1983, they launched their first ski goggle, applying the same ventilation and impact engineering to winter sports. Then, in 1984, Jannard had the most important product idea in the company's history. He took the wide, curved, protective lens of a motocross goggle and mounted it onto a pair of sunglasses. That was the factory pilot eye shades, and it changed what a pair of sunglasses could be. Before 1984, athletes were wearing heavy aviator frames and wayfarers that slid down their noses the moment they started moving. The eye shades used Unobtanium nose pads and ear socks that gripped tighter as you sweated. The same material Jannard had engineered for motorcycle handlebars in 1975 was now holding sunglasses on the face of a Tour de France rider. In 1984, Greg LeMond got his hands on a pair and reached out to Jannard himself, asking for extra lenses for the Tour. 2 years later, he won the Tour de France wearing them. And now, Oakley wasn't just in motocross anymore. It was on the biggest stage in cycling. By 1987, the rest of the peloton followed. In 1985, Oakley released the Frog Skins. And this time, it wasn't built for the track. It was built for everything around it. Surf, skate, street culture. For the first time, Oakley wasn't just something you wore to ride. It was something you wore everywhere. The brand was stepping out of motocross and into everyday life without losing what made it work in the first place. The 1990s turned Oakley into a global name. Hollywood picked it up. Athletes across every sport started wearing it. In 1995, Oakley went public and raised $230 million. Around that same time, Michael Jordan joined the board, bringing the brand even deeper into mainstream culture. And by 2007, Oakley was acquired by Luxottica for $2.1 billion. Think about that for a second. A motocross grip company was now sitting inside the largest eyewear empire in the world. And through all of it, the most aggressive technical development stayed right where it started, on the dirt bike track. And that's where the real difference shows up. Not in ads, not in hype, but in what happens when you're actually riding. To understand why motocross riders specifically are loyal to Oakley in a way that goes beyond brand preference, you have to understand what these goggles are actually built from. This is where the brand separates from everything else on the shelf. Let's start with the lens. For decades, every motocross goggle on the market was roughly made the same way. Take a flat sheet of Lexan plastic, stamp out an oval shape, bend it into the goggle frame. That was the industry standard. But the problem is that bending flat plastic into a curve forces the material into a shape it was never designed to hold. The bending process creates microstress fractures and, more critically, optical distortion. Light passing through bent, flat plastic refracts unevenly. Objects appear slightly offset from where they actually are. And on a motocross track, that difference shows up immediately. You either hit your line, or you don't. Oakley replaced bent Lexan with plutonite. This is a material molded into its final shape instead of forced into it, which means no distortion. What you see is exactly what's in front of you. And on a motocross track, that difference matters more than people realize. because when you're reading ruts and jump faces at speed, being slightly off isn't just uncomfortable, it's a mistake. Plutonite is also a ballistic-grade shield. Rocks and dirt fly off the rear tires of bikes at speeds that would crack standard plastic immediately. Plutonite lenses have been tested against close-range BB gun shots and high-pressure mechanical spikes without shattering or penetrating. The UV protection, blocking 100% of the UVA, UVB, UVC, and harmful blue light up to 400 nanometers, is built into the material itself, rather than applied as a surface coating, which means it can't be scratched away over time. And the frame material is O-matter, which is a custom nylon composite that's about 25% lighter than standard acetate and twice as strong. O-matter stays stable in extreme cold and heat, which matters when you're running an enduro in January or a desert race in July. It flexes just enough to conform to the geometry of your face and the opening of your helmet, then returns to its original shape without deforming. More recently, Oakley introduced Bio-matter, which is a frame material built with at least 56% bio-based carbon content derived from castor oil. Same ballistic strength, just significantly less reliance on petrochemicals in manufacturing. And then there's Prizm, which is where Oakley stopped just protecting your vision and started changing how you see the track. Traditional tinted lenses cut light across the whole visible spectrum evenly. They reduce glare, but they also flatten contrast. Shadows disappear. Ruts and terrain transitions lose their visual definition. You end up with a lens that protects your eyes but makes the track harder to read. Prizm works on a completely different principle. By mixing specific chemical dyes precisely into the plutonite base, Prizm lenses selectively filter out the wavelengths of light that wash out vision, while boosting the specific wavelengths the human eye uses to perceive depth, contrast, and surface detail. In a dirt environment, that means browns, reds, and greens become vivid and distinct from one another.
In about 45 to 60 seconds in injection molding and 500 degrees of heat.
For instance, a braking bump you'd normally miss at speed suddenly pops out of the terrain. Wet clay versus hard-packed dirt reads as completely different surfaces instead of blending together. Prizm MX Bronze handles mixed light environments. Prizm MX Jade Iridium is tuned for woods and trail riding, making green forest transitions sharper so you can distinguish between dirt track and tree line at pace. Prizm MX Black Iridium cuts extreme sun in open desert environments without sacrificing terrain contrast. The result is pretty simple. You see more, you react faster, and you make decisions before everyone else. The O-frame started a lineage. Over the next 4 decades, Oakley released a series of flagship motocross goggles that each solved a specific problem the rest of the market had been ignoring. The Crowbar MX arrived in 2005. By the mid-2000s, motocross helmets were getting wider with thicker padding around the eye port. Traditional goggle straps attached directly to the sides of the flexible frame were pulling the chassis outward when stretched around these wider helmets, breaking the foam seal and letting dust through. Oakley engineered rigid O-matter outriggers, extended winglet structures that moved the strap attachment point forward. The strap could now clear the thick helmet edge without pulling the frame away from the rider's face. The geometry redirected the strap's tension inward instead of outward, applying even, balanced pressure across the full width of the moisture-wicking triple-layer foam. The Crowbar also pushed the lens width out to 9 inches, which gave riders the wider peripheral vision they'd been asking for. The Mayhem MX wasn't about adding more. It was about fixing what riders were already feeling mid-race. Example, the nose bridge was significantly flattened. In a 30-minute moto at full anaerobic output, a goggle that presses down on your nasal passages limits your airflow and kills your performance. The Mayhem fixed that. It came standard with a clear lens, a tinted lens, a removable nose guard, and a 7-pack of laminated tear-offs. Exceptional value at launch, and widely regarded at the time as one of the most comfortable fitting chassis on the market. In 2013, Oakley dropped the Airbrake MX and reset what a premium goggle was. The price was between $160 and $220. The reason was a complete architectural redesign. The Airbrake introduced an exoskeleton chassis, a rigid O-matter front frame designed specifically to hold the injection-molded plutonite lens without any flex that could distort the optics. Attached to that rigid structure was a soft thermoplastic urethane faceplate that conformed intimately to the rider's face for comfort and seal. Lens changes on older goggles meant forcing a flimsy Lexan sheet into a tight frame groove. Smudged lenses, bent frames. Oakley replaced that frustration with switch lock. Locator holes on the Plutonite lens drop onto corresponding nubs on the frame, and 2 mechanical levers lock it into place. A lens swap now takes seconds instead of minutes of wrestling. The roll-off system on the air brake was redesigned completely too. Standard roll-offs ran a narrow strip of film across the center of the lens, which gave you a functional but restrictively small clear window. Oakley integrated the roll-off canisters directly into the outrigger strap attachments, allowing a much wider strip of film that increased the clear field of view by 60% compared to standard aftermarket systems. And thin, transparent wire physically lifted the film off the lens surface, preventing it from sticking to the Plutonite in heavy rain, which had been a persistent frustration riders had accepted for years. The Frontline MX launched in late 2017 and brought Plutonite and Prizm into a rimless design at a lower price point than the air brake. The ridge-lock system sealed the lens over a full-frame circumference recess rather than inside a groove, creating a completely sealed, rimless look that expanded both peripheral and downward vision by removing the outer frame lip. The Frontline was also built from the start with frame notches at the temples for riders who wear prescription glasses, allowing comfortable OTG compatibility without the goggle foam pressing the glasses painfully into the side of the head. For a long time, if you wanted the best goggle, you bought Oakley. Then that stopped being true. The 100% Armega and the Scott Prospect arrived as genuine alternatives, and the three-way competition that followed pushed standards across the entire category. The Armega came in solving a different problem: heat and sweat. Its most praised feature is sweat management. A physical system channels perspiration away from the foam and out of the frame before it can pool and drip onto the inner lens surface. In a long outdoor moto in high heat, that makes a real difference in visibility. The Scott Prospect pushed something else: visibility. It locks in with a 4-pin mechanical system and uses foam that aggressively absorbs moisture from the rider's face. But where does Oakley sit against that? Well, most independent testers and professional riders still rate Plutonite and Prizm as the benchmark for optical clarity and terrain reading.
Of the goggle, you can see where it locks on all these different points. What I found:
the switch lock system remains the fastest and most secure lens change mechanism in the market. The air brake and Frontline continue to win most head-to-head tests for visual performance and ballistic protection. The trade-offs are real. The air brake is the most expensive option in the category, which prices it out of reach for some riders on tighter budgets. The Prizm and iridium coatings on the external lens surface are also perceived by some professional testers as more susceptible to micro-scratching than the lenses on the Armega or Prospect. And tear-offs aren't just a performance accessory when you're running Oakley. They're a necessity if you want the lens to last a full season. Oakley's position over purely motocross-focused brands runs deeper than any single spec comparison, though. The research and development budget that comes from being a multi-billion-dollar global entity with applications across military ballistics, skiing, cycling, football, and golf gives Oakley resources that no motocross-only competitor could possibly match.
Smoothly over the bike. And yeah, despite the huge increase in surface area.
The Hypergrip technology launched in the Stunt Collection partnership with NFL wide receiver Justin Jefferson uses a flexible Unobtanium temple brand to keep sunglasses anchored during the violent sprinting and hits of a professional football game. The same material science that Jannard developed for motorcycle handlebars in 1975 is now holding eyewear in place in an NFL stadium in 2026. That kind of applied materials lineage doesn't exist anywhere else in the motocross market. Oakley's Lake Forest, California headquarters isn't like any other corporate building you've ever walked through. Designed by former CEO Colin Baden, the facility has blast walls at the entrance, functional cannons, and a fully operational military tank parked out front. Inside, the lobby uses blackened steel, ejection seats as waiting area furniture, and mechanical angel sculptures. Deep inside the building sit restricted zones called the Mad Scientist Labs. The architecture here is deliberate. Oakley has hundreds of people moving through that building every day, and the design communicates a single message to all of them: you are at war with ordinary. The corporate culture it produces genuinely believes the status quo deserves to be fought, not respected. As Oakley's global president Ko Amato put it during the company's 50th anniversary, the brand's legacy is an invitation to abandon the loop of what has always been and create what could be through disruption, design, and defiance. That resonates in the dirt bike world in a way it doesn't in other sports. Motocross riders don't ride to fit in. They ride because they can't stop. The sport attracts people who are comfortable with risk and genuinely bored by safety. Oakley built its entire culture around those exact people. The athlete relationships have always reflected that. In the early 1980s, Supercross champion Mike Bell became an official Oakley employee, specifically in 1985. Not just a name on an endorsement contract, but a person embedded in the company's operational structure, connecting elite track-level knowledge directly to product development. When Bell passed away in 2021, the community mourned the way you mourn family. Ricky Carmichael, universally recognized as the GOAT in both motocross and supercross, carried Oakley's name across billboard campaigns that bridged the gap between niche sport recognition and mainstream visibility. James Bubba Stewart and Ryan Villapoto provided real-time engineering feedback during the development of the Airbrake MX, specifically driving the demand for wider roll-off film and distortion-free lenses in high-stakes supercross racing. Today, the roster runs through Eli Tomac, Chase Sexton. Oakley is on their faces at the starting gate of every main event. The brand runs just as deep through the media that surrounds the sport. From rider podcasts to race coverage and behind-the-scenes documentaries, Oakley is part of the conversation, not just the gear. Motocross doesn't care about hype. It cares about what works. And for decades, Oakley proved it. Drop a comment below. Are Oakleys still the standard, or has someone finally caught up? Thanks for watching, and stay wicked.